Welcome to This Academic Life, Episode 83.
This episode is sponsored by the School of Engineering at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Did you know that RPI engineering professor Pankaj Karandi and his group recently used a 3D printer to print human skin, which could potentially be used for burn victims? Not only that, they reported being able to grow hair follicle cells in the printed skin for the very first time. Now that's what we call solving a big, hairy problem. Hi, my name is Lucy Zhang. I am a professor of mechanical engineering and associate dean for research innovations, partnerships, and workforce development.
Hi, my name is Pania Newell. I'm also a professor of mechanical engineering.
Hi, my name is Kim Michelle Lewis. I'm a professor of physics and associate dean for research. Today, we will discuss research laboratory renovations. This is one of the big items that junior faculty may face, especially if they're experimentalists. I just recently completed a research laboratory renovation of my own lab. It sort of reminded me of a major kitchen renovation. And just like a kitchen renovation, I had to engage with plumbers, electricians, planners for furniture and color scheme, mechanical, a lot of mechanical, HVAC. So it really reminded me of my kitchen renovation that I had in my own condo. So I was sort of prepared in that sense of interacting with all of these people and being able to answer questions on the spot, being able to make very quick decisions. It was both exciting and stressful at the same time, but it was a good stress. It's stressful in the sense that you really have to think through things that you foresee happening in your lab. So you know what your current research activity is. But when you think about it, you also have to plan for the growth of your lab as your research evolves and things change and equipment. So that part was also stressful and fun. So I wanted to just chat with you guys to tell you about some lessons that I learned and give you an opportunity to kind of ask me questions, because I think this is something that is not talked about a lot. Even when you go on interviews as a junior faculty, most often, sometimes you just walk right into a brand new lab space. It's already set to go. And then other times they show you a room that might need a little tender loving care. So I think this is something that many STEM researchers don't necessarily think about, especially when they're negotiating their startup package and just the amount of time they need to put into a laboratory renovation and how that could actually eat into their tenure clock if they're on a tenure clock. Fortunately for me, I'm already a full professor, so I wasn't necessarily on a tenure clock, but there was still a time constraint that I had. So what questions do you guys have for me about research laboratory renovations?
Before I ask the question, it just all reminded me, it was just only a week ago, because my current position, so I attended one of the school council meeting, and we had some junior faculty to come and talk about themselves and introduce their research to the council. One of the things that they asked the junior faculty was, what are the challenges that you face? And one major theme was the challenge in their lab space. So that it went from, just allocation, just simply allocation, because they do, drones, like you need space, you can't. And another person does autonomous vehicles. So you need a garage to store his car, and it's a lab car, right? So you can't just like drive it home and put it in your own garage. So those type of things, it's very interesting. I'm very fortunate I was there, because I don't think I would ever have an exposure to hear from that side of things. So as they're talking about the challenges, the dean and then said, of all the trainings that one can get in terms of leadership, in terms of how to be a good manager. No textbook can ever teach you how to manage space. And it's just a common problem that it just exists all the time and there's no solution for it. And everybody's like laughing because it's so real that this is a real problem. And especially I'm thinking on campus. Typically, you don't expand easily. You can't just like buy a new building somewhere. I mean, it's difficult. And research comes in all different forms and shapes, and who would have thought that someone needed a car? He probably did, but at that time when he was interviewing, the new junior faculty was interviewing, he didn't think about a garage or storage space, or maybe he did, and people were like, oh, sure, we'll find a place for it, that kind of thing, but it was never solidified. I just thought, oh my goodness, this came so timely. I think this topic is just always ongoing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that junior, senior faculty, they are all dealing with the lab space at some point in their careers, or renovations. Some of them, they've been in their lab for ages, and now, I don't know, there is a leakage, and then they need to deal with that. So my question for you, Kim, is, can you just tell us about the first step? How did you get it all started?
Well, the first step was identifying the space. Okay. So once the space was identified, was meeting with the campus planner to look at the space, to see if the space even is eligible to be outfitted to do the type of research I wanted to do. The second step was getting rid of, if the space that was identified for me had stuff in it. And so the first step was getting the stuff out. So because I'm a physicist, I, didn't want to throw everything out. So I actually spent a couple of months like going through the stuff, because the lab was for another physics professor. So I went through everything. And so I was finding resistors and multimeters. And so I did that. And then after I identified things that I wanted to keep and things I wanted to throw out, the next step was them just taking everything out. And so then the next step was working with like an architecture or a designer to kind of design a space. And at that point, it got a little scary, because you really have to think about the placement of your equipment. And a lot of the equipment that I use is not like optics, where you just sit an optics table in the middle of the room and all your equipment goes. A lot of my stuff go along the walls. So then we went through the step of just laying out the space, where are the benches, where are the cabinets, what wall is this gonna house, how many electrical outlets I'll need. Once that was laid out, then they came in and started putting down the floors and started that stuff. And then we started having weekly meetings. So every week they would give me an update. Then we got to the next phase, where you start picking out items like, what color is your countertop? What color are your cabinets? Start picking out floor tiles, what kind of lighting you want, what kind of task lighting you want. Then there's a period of just silence, because now you're just waiting for things to come in. Then once things come in, they start putting everything together. You start thinking about how many Ethernet cables you need. Do you need a phone? You start thinking about safety. That was another thing. You had to spend time thinking about, where is the eye wash station? Because I had a fume hood. Where are the students gonna have an emergency eye wash kit? Where is the shower? Like, so if they spill acid or something on them, is there a shower close by that they can pull the lever? And so you start thinking about safety. And those were the major steps. And then after everything is in, the next step is like, does stuff work? Does the fume hood work? Unpacking your things. So those were the major steps involved in the lab renovation.
Yeah, about 2 years ago, finally I got my space. And when you were walking us through the steps, it was similar to that, but the The good thing was that they were a bunch of labs. They were getting ready for their cabinets, and all the, I guess, interior design things were happening at the same time with the company that I guess they are reliable. So university has that contract with them. But it's interesting that you mentioned that where things they go, because I felt that we were so tired of waiting. We just wanted to rush through. It's like, well, I don't care at this point. Just get the cabinet. I just want some cabinet. We'll figure it out later. And but then later we found out, oh shoot, we don't have enough of this, or now we need to fix it. But yeah, so it's like, I think that I've never heard anybody having a good experience going through the design part. Even if budget is not an issue, you have a perfect person and perfect company to work with.
Yes.
There are so many things that can go wrong.
Yes.
And even after now that it's a couple of years that we are using the lab, it's like still we discover things. Oh, I should have done this, but it's now too late.
So I did have some anxiety about forgetting stuff, and I still forgot something, which was the tool case. So yeah, and then I didn't take into account that the safety stuff would be in the lab. So the shower is in the lab. So at previous universities, like usually it's outside, like right outside the lab in the hallway or something, but everything is self-contained. So that ate away some space. And then what I realized, and I guess I didn't feel this when I did my kitchen renovation, but putting up drywall, you really lose square footage. So when they put up the drywall, I was like, what the hell just happened? Like, it's like, you felt like you had all of this space, and then they put up the drywall and you realize you have much less space, right? It was something I wasn't conscious of. And so, also, yeah, I do understand.
And also, I'm sure that you don't have a shower in your kitchen. So
right, I don't have an eye wash station in my
kitchen. Yes. Oh, yes. I'm cutting onions, so now I need to wash my eyes.
Right. And so, but I think one of the best experiences that I had, I think overall my experience was good because the team was really good. And I felt like this sense of, we want this to be a great lab. And so I felt like they listened to a lot of the issues that I might have brought up about, where the location of this or the location of that. I learned a lot. They were very patient in teaching me about, okay, we're going to put this here because of this. And I went to the site nearly every other day. I watched it evolve, and they were always happy to, to have me there and ask them questions, because for them, they feel like some research scientists or professors are very hands-off, and then they don't come to the lab. And then when they do come, they find all of these things that's wrong. So they kind of welcome me, visiting every other week to just say, oh, let's, put the gas cylinders on this wall. I think that makes more sense because it's closer to the fume hood. And, so they appreciated those comments. So I really did learn a lot. I felt like I really had a really good team.
I just wanted to also quickly say that my experience was also the same too. The more you communicate with them, because these people, that's their job, and they've seen so many of those problems that we might not have been thinking about them in advance. So yeah, I had a really great relationship with the designer, and they were really, really kind people, and they really wanted to help. They didn't want to delay things, but things happened.
But I can also feel like, as a junior faculty member, going through that as a junior faculty member would be extremely stressful. So I know junior faculty members get an option sometimes whether they want to teach their first semester or have the second semester off. Like, I think they should factor in the lab renovation part. And like, if I was a junior faculty, I probably would just go ahead and teach my first semester, right? With the thought process that probably in my second semester, the lab will be up and running. And that's when I'm going to need the time away from teaching. The other thing, I think they need to have a backup plan. Like, if, some place, whether it's another lab on campus, whether it's a collaborator, they need to have a plan in place to keep their research going. So even if it's going to a collaborator's lab and getting some things out, I think they need to use that 1 year or 6 months or that 8 months or 10-month period to still work on their research. And I do think, like, some people elect to not hire research assistants and postdocs during that lab renovation time. But I actually found that, and I was kind of stressed about whether or not I would do that, but I did. And it was helpful because during the lab renovation time, she was using her time to pick out equipment, to get purchase orders, all of that stuff, instead of waiting till the lab is ready. And then we lose 6 months waiting on equipment to come in and getting purchase orders. So some of this stuff can be done in parallel. And so I think you really have to think about that timeline and don't just be like, oh, I don't have a lab. I'm not going to hire grad students. I'm not going to get a postdoc. I'm not going to get this. And then I feel like that's time, a little bit time wasted, in my opinion.
So if a junior faculty, say, already signed a contract that they're coming to your institution, but they're physically not there yet, or, they don't have the purchase power yet because their startup doesn't really start until they join the university. How do they plan that, like, ahead of time? Because I mean, if you're doing renovation now, like, you're already a full professor, and so you already know kind of the way things work, and probably things go very efficient. But if you're not there, you don't know anybody. What is the best way for them to kind of plan ahead? First of all, I'm assuming they already know what kind of lab space they're gonna have. Like, what is the best way for them to get started in that process?
Yeah, I think if they've already signed the contract, I think visiting is helpful. So like, after you sign the contract, you should be able to go and visit to meet with the campus planner. I remember at RPI, after I signed, I think I came up for another visit specifically for the lab space. And I think I remember meeting with the campus planner about the lab space. So I think that the universities are probably flexible, because once you sign, you're not off limits. You probably can't purchase anything. I agree with you. But I think you can meet with the campus planners and the campus organizers to start thinking about the infrastructure that you need for the lab. And I think it's also a good time to try to find where you're going to do your work in the meantime. And if you're really lucky, if you talk to them in advance, they may be able to, one, either identify a very small space for you to get some work done, or they may be able to give you a small space within your lab. So they could just say, okay, we're going to, this quarter of the lab, we're just going to be off limits, so you can do some work in that area and we'll work around you. So I think the more information you have, the better. I think it's also a good time to get what they call cut sheets for your equipment. So if you're going to have a cryostat or a superconducting magnet, like calling the companies and getting a cut sheet, which tells all of the mechanical, electrical outlets you're going to need, all of the plumbing you're going to need, and being able to give that to the campus planner so that they'll know, okay, she's going to need a specialty outlet for this. Oh, she's going to need a 6-foot ceiling for this area because she has a transfer tube that she needs to use for her equipment. So I think you could still do things during that time. It's just that we're not taught that this is what you should be doing. And so that's why I think it's important to have this conversation, because all of the junior faculty that come in at my university, I do tell them to start planning.
So who's in general responsible for the cost, and who junior faculty should talk to when it comes to the lab renovation?
The dean. I think the dean is probably the first person, the dean and a department chair. So usually the department chair would know, and then most often it's the dean, and then the dean would probably pass you off to the campus planning and the facilities people, and usually they'll assign you like a project manager from that point. So that would be the way.
So also, is that possible that junior faculty delay their start date till they have their labs ready?
That's a good question. I have seen that happen where instead of having a fall start date, they would have a spring start date. But if you are a junior faculty, meaning like untenured, your tenure track, typically most universities want you to start in the fall. I've seen other faculty that are already coming in tenured, and for them it's okay to start in the spring because they're not on that track. So I think it is possible to delay until your lab is ready. I think it just depends on where you are in your career.
I mean, if I can ask a question related to people who do computational work. The reason I'm asking was that I had no idea that I needed a lab space for my lab when I came. So because I think people assumed, and I myself also assumed, that all I need was computers. And as long as I have a room where there are desks, I'm all set. That's exactly what I got. In fact, as a result, I never understood the concept of renovation. Like everything that you were talking about, I'm like, I did not go through that process at all. Maybe it's probably fault on my part. I used all my startup to purchase computers, and then also as part of a supercomputer, right? So a cluster, I should say. And so I didn't think about, oh, I need money to renovate my space. So what happened was I got moved around, I want to say 4 times before my tenure, and different lab spaces because I'm movable. I'm the most movable person in my department at that time because I do purely computational. I'm new. I didn't have a group of like 10 people. I still don't. And I didn't have that many people. And so, I'm the most easy, right? So if someone needed another space that requires certain things, high ceiling, or has to be like isolated from vibration, whatever it is, they're like, Lucy, you got to move. Right. So I got moved 4 or 5 times until at one point, the person, our technician who's in my department, who's like helping me move every time, said, Lucy, you got to lock it down this time. You got to lock it. Lock all your desks to the wall so they stop moving you. It was like getting ridiculous. So that was actually my last move, not because he said that. It was really at a space where they didn't want to remove any existing parts of the lab. It would used to be, I think, a chemical lab, perhaps. So they had those high tables and stuff and storage and cabinets, all for experimental use. And then they can't remove them because they're toxic materials. So my lab right now is still like that with concrete floor and concrete walls. So what do you suggest for people like me, like who do computational work? What should they think about when they start out?
Yeah, I think that's interesting that they kept moving you around, but it's probably because real estate, it's like, I think it would be very similar. I think it should be something that should be talked about right up front. I think in your case, most often when we hire the scientists, and we know they're going to have a research lab, it's kind of obvious, like, okay, that's going to be built into their startup package. For yourself, I think it's even, or for other computational chemists or scientists, mechanical engineers, the like, I think it's important to write that out as a part of your negotiations, like to state up front, this is going to be the need for my computational needs. And I think if it's outlined up front, then maybe they're less likely to kind of move you around. But I also feel like you have to use the space. So it's very similar to what your colleague was saying, like lock everything down. So for me, what I did was you try to use all the space. So let's just say they give you a room and you're like, wow, this is nice. And you space everything out and you have 3 students on one side and 3 students on the other side, and they have a little snack area in the middle. You make it seem like there is no snacking in this room. You got a desk everywhere. You plop computers and laptops on, and you make it seem like your space is always being used all the time. Like all the time. There is no square footage. And I remember one time there was like, oh, well, we already have a computational person. You could just share their computational lab. I'm like, no, right? So when you go in there, it's just like, oh no, we can't work in Lucy's lab. Every workstation is full. You, you just make it seem like every inch of space you need. I think for me, that's the strategy. So even when I laid out my lab, I made it very clear, like every corner is filled, which is why I end up leaving out space for the 2 case. But you want to give the impression that you requested the space and there's a reason why you requested so much space, and you want to be able to use it. And then it'll be up to you if you want a junior faculty to share your space with you for a little while until they find some space. But I think for you is very important to put it in as a part of the negotiation, the square footage that you would need and why. And I've even seen some starter package that say the location, like they'll say, I'm bringing a scanning probe microscopy system, so I need to be in the basement, or I need to be on a solid concrete slab or something very specific. And then with that type of criteria, they can't bounce you around, right? Like if you say, this is the type of ventilation and stuff I need for my CPUs, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that would be the advice that I would give.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people need to, what I needed, I think at that time was to talk to someone, perhaps. I did not like just, it was just kind of, oh, I got to move. I just need computers. Give me some money to buy some new computers. That's all I needed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I just didn't think ahead, didn't think about it. For junior faculty, they probably want to ask, right? They want to talk to other people, their friends, their peers, what did they get from when they started?
So thank you guys for joining. So thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. You can follow us on Facebook and listen to our latest episodes on iTunes, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Join us next time for the good, the bad, and the ugly of this academic life.